Koro taha te pō, koro taha te ao nō runga nei koe nō raro nei iau whanō. Haramai te tō kia haumi e, hui e, taiki e. Ngā mate o te wā pūrara haramai haere. Tātou kei te pito o rati he wa mauri ora, and welcome back to the Hui. Tonight, we host our first MPs debate from most of the parliamentary political parties in Parliament now. All communications have been held with the parties, and we had hoped to get representatives from all 6 parties. But as you can see, we have 5 of the 6 parties from Parliament represented with us tonight. Only New Zealand First could not get one of its 8 MPs represented here tonight. Waratau nā hoki. So we have with us here to my left from the Labour Party, Willie Jackson, Heuri no Ngāti Porou Ngāti Kahungunu Te Tairāwhiti me Ngāti Maniapoto. Also immediately to my left representing the Green Party, Heuri no Ngāti Awa Waikato Tainui, Te Matha Paul, Te Matha Tēnā. Also immediately to my right, the Minister, the Honourable Karen Chua, Heuri no Ngā Puhi no mai e te minita. Also from the National Party, Dana Kirkpatrick, Heuri no te aitanga maha ki tēnā koe. No mai. And from Te Party, Māori, Heuri no ngā iwi maha kahungunu tahu pōtiki and everyone else in between. Tāku te whereas Te Party Māori, tēnā koe no mai. E aku rangatira tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to the Hui. It's great to have you with us. So we're going to have 3 parts of debate tonight. Let's get into it now. We're going to start with the budget. I'd like to ask all of you for one word that you would use to describe this year's budget. Tāku te whereas.
Assimilative.
Dana Kirkpatrick.
Inclusive.
Yeah, I'd say inclusive.
Te Matha Paul.
Greed.
Willie Jackson.
Disgraceful.
Why disgraceful, Willie Jackson?
Disgraceful because, well, first of all, we have had maybe the worst broken promise in the history of budgets. When you promise 13 drugs to people and you make that part of your campaign, and people's lives are depending on it. It just was almost beyond belief that they were not able to support that funding. I was listening to Malcolm Mulholland. I thought it was brilliant, and he was in the gallery waiting for the announcement. These guys, they campaigned on this. They campaigned on people's lives, and they did not come across. It was the most shameful decision that this government has made. Maybe any government has made.
But the government has said that they will guarantee to commit to that funding.
That's right. Well, how many people are going to die between now and then?
Well, they've said they're going to commit to that funding at some stage. So I want to get to the other parts of the budget, because interestingly, what the government will say is they have delivered on exactly what they said they were going to do in the election campaign last year.
Well, they haven't, have they? Because they
that aside,
apart from a couple of hundred people dying, you know, in the basically they've in the hope that they would get cancer treatment. This is what our people wanted. When I say our people, Māori and Pākehā, right across the spectrum, they have prioritised. Prioritised homeowners. They've prioritised their landlords. 2.9 billion going to landlords. I'd give my tax cuts away. They've prioritised tax cuts ahead of people's lives. It is a disgraceful decision.
Te Matha Paul, you said greed. The ultimate argument the government will uphold here is that in the main it has delivered, and we shouldn't be surprised by what they delivered in the budget, because they promised that in the election campaign last year. So why did you say greed?
Well, it kind of goes off what Willie was just saying, but basically the only winners in this budget are people who are already wealthy. So normal New Zealanders, Māori, people who are trying to start a whānau and live their lives and contribute to our country get nothing out of this budget. The only people who are benefiting from this budget are those landlords who are getting tax cuts. And if you look at all of the different initiatives that have been chopped, whether that's Māori housing, whether that's, benefits and whānau being able to put kai on the table, it's all been cut in the name of making the rich even richer. So this is about greed. 14,000 kids will end up in poverty in the next few years so that these landlords can have even more money that they do not need.
But the government will say that people will get tax cuts and that there's support for those with kids, right? That's the government's response to that argument.
I think people that may have voted for this government I don't think they signed up to make a very small part of our country even richer. I think people might have, wanted a bit of a change from the last government, and they might have wanted the economy to do better, but it's not. Everybody's losing their jobs. There's no money for people to spend in the economy, and our kids are worse off under this budget.
Karen Shaw, the word you used was inclusive. When you hear the arguments about Māori housing, right? When you hear the argument about the loss of Te Aka Whaiora, the Māori Health Authority, how do you respond? How can that possibly be the word that you use?
I mean, it's no surprise that I think we should be basing our budget on the needs of the people in our communities. I've stood up in Parliament before and said, is it really okay to have two separate budgets, one for Māori and one for non-Māori? Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that every organisation that is on the ground meeting the needs of our people is funded well on the front line to make sure that we are providing great services. So what I campaigned on was making sure that, yep, let's spend the money, but make sure that the money is actually achieving what we need it to achieve. And quite frankly, every time I get asked, why is there no added extra funding? Well, it's kind of hard to spend money when you've run out of other people's money. We don't have the luxury of borrowing and borrowing more money. It's going to take years to pay back what we've already borrowed. So what we've got to make sure now is we are streamlining, we're making sure that our agencies are focusing on the true needs of the community, and that includes Māori.
But this government,
landlords are not Māori.
But this government is still borrowing.
There are Māori
this
landlords, there are Māori business owners. Yeah. And unfortunately, the cost of that money that we borrowed during the last government is actually costing a lot more to pay back now.
Dana Kirkpatrick, the Finance Minister said, quote, this is a budget that delivers for Māori, because when a New Zealander turns up to an emergency room or a school, they don't turn up thinking about their ethnicity. That's a very uninformed comment from someone who's not Māori and therefore hasn't had the experience that Māori have had in health and education and the correctional system. How do you respond?
Oh, look, I think, when I've spoken to people in my electorate and in my place that I come from about the budget, they want health, they want equality in health, education, they want to understand what the cost of living looks like, and they want a better justice.
As do Māori.
Well, I'm speaking about Māori. That's what they tell me they want. And this budget, in my mind, delivers on that. It delivers $16 million into health. Now, you can't tell me that that's not going to benefit Māori. It delivers $2.9 billion into education, and we know that, only 1 in 3 Māori children or tamariki or rangatahi are going to school regularly at the moment. In my electorate, some of those schools have a 28% attendance rate. So we need to get those people back into schools, and we want to deliver on that.
How do you answer the charge, though, that this is assimilative, when we need discrete budgeting to be able to deal with the equality and equity of health outcomes and education outcomes that we're talking about, which require specific funding? How do you respond?
Sure. Well, I think there's a specific target and focus on Māori health in where I come from, rural, isolated communities, Māori communities, with an inequality of access to health services. We understand that. But iwi Māori partnership boards will set up under the Māori Health Authority, Te Aka Whaiora, and they will continue to do that work. Māori Hauora will continue to do the fantastic work they've been doing, and that will still be funded. And if we had spent the $11 billion of the Māori Health Authority on delivering frontline access to health, that would have made a difference.
Therefore, the argument is that it is an inclusive, not an assimilative budget.
Well, it's clear to see that it's an assimilative budget, and more importantly, the attitude of the government is that assimilation will somehow provide for Māori, even though we have 160 plus years of being on the bad end of assimilation, and somehow just magically in 2024 it's going to turn around and Māori are going to do well in the system. Well, everything tells us that Māori won't do well in the system, and when you take the actions of the first 6 months of this year, it's very clear to see that the government doesn't have the best interests of Māori at heart. It's also the budget of cuts. There's been $300 million of targeted by Māori, for Māori delivery cut out of the budget.
Which this government says will still get an outcome from Māori.
Oh, it will, but it'll be based in an assimilative system and approach, and we already know that we don't do well. So to claim that delivery of central services will do well for Māori, that's completely uninformed. There's so much evidence to tell you that that won't work. Just saying it's going to work isn't going to make it work.
We have a lot more to talk about, not just on budget. We're going to be talking about treaty principles and the Waitangi Tribunal after this. Stay with us. Toro Koe Hoana. We have more from our MPs debate on the hui. Kia ora mai anō. Welcome back to our MPs debate on the hui. Let's talk about the Waitangi Tribunal and treaty principles. Tana Kirkpatrick, 50 years next year of the Waitangi Tribunal, its 50th anniversary, started in 1975. What does the Waitangi Tribunal represent to you?
Oh, look, I think the Waitangi Tribunal has been an enormous part of New Zealand history, and it's played a significant part in where we've come in the last 50 years. I think that our government has said that maybe it's time to understand what the contemporary contribution is for the Waitangi Tribunal, and I don't think that's a bad place to start. That we should look at that and understand what that looks like. What
do you say to Māori who have some concerns that there should be a separation between the executive and the judiciary, and the tribunal is a part of the judiciary?
Well, I think the review will cover that, and I don't think we should get in front of the review. I'd like to see what comes out of that and how that plays a part in all of those different parts of the argument.
Willie Jackson, there will be a review. 50 years, and I'll come to Tamitha as well, but there will be a review next year. Isn't it right that there is a review? It is the 50th anniversary.
Well, yes and no. It depends what's...
Why not?
Well, it depends what's driving the review, because some of the stuff we keep hearing from Seymour and your Uncle Shane Jones is very, very worrying, OK? The reality is that I've been really proud of the tribunal. I'm so proud of the work they've done over the years. Being a watchdog, they've been responsible for so much. It's responsible in terms of our reo. They're the ones who've talked about supporting our language, Māori broadcasting, Māori health, right across the spectrum. And see, this nonsense that I hear from Shane about, they might have seen their day. Not at all have they seen their day. The tribunal should go on forever and a day, because the reality is, are we going to trust the Crown? Are we going to trust the Crown going forward? I mean, you don't know.
Well, hang on, you were the Crown.
Well, you can trust us. But in earlier days, you couldn't. Right? I was part of that crew who rallied against it. No, but you need a watchdog. You need but you need a watchdog to watch Labour, to watch National, to watch ACT. Our people need a safety valve, and the tribunal provides that. They've done some brilliant work, and Karen should have appeared before them instead of them going through that.
I will come to Karen, but Tamitha Paul, I want to read a quote. The treaty is not fossilised. The treaty is not frozen in time. Each generation, surrounded by its own vicissitudes and its own freshness and its own promises, will visit upon the treaty what it thinks ought to be seen as a prevailing and a sustainable meaning. It's a quote from Shane Jones in 2007.
Oh, hell.
He sounded like...
What happened in these last...
He sounded like...
Switch up so hard.
So tell me, tell me, what do you think?
About what he said?
Yeah, and also the place of the tribunal going forward. I mean, there should be a review?
Yeah, well, I think the reality is that the Waitangi Tribunal was set up in the first place because this Crown has failed Māori disproportionately. Like, you look at all of the statistics, you want to look at homelessness, you want to look at incarceration, the level that our communities are policed, you want to look at our health outcomes. They are all terrible and they're getting worse. And this budget makes them even worse.
Well, you had 6
and
years
that is why Waitangi Tribunal was set up to be
Do you not
a
want our
watchdog
communities police to make sure that victims aren't being hurt in our communities?
I would love it if I could finish my sentence. Thank you.
Go for it. Timothy.
So that is the reason that it was set up, to address the failings of our colonial governments, successive governments led by our legacies parties.
What do you say to the charge that the tribunal is essentially trying to apply a handbrake to government policy?
It's a necessary handbrake, because if you're making decisions that are meddling with tamariki Māori and is meddling with te reo Māori, well then, yeah, you deserve to have some level of scrutiny, some level of actual independent scrutiny, unlike these reviews that are negotiated by this government via text message. Hey, bro, can you do this review for me? You know, that's the kind of accountability we have by this government.
And you've got a $500,000 job now, eh?
Exactly.
Tagata Ferris, can I ask the same point to you? That Shane Jones and others will say that we need the review because you cannot have something that is akin to a court applying a handbrake to government policy that it was elected upon through an election campaign.
Well, look, the tribunal was set up to be the conscience of the country and the conscience of an agreement between two constitutional partners. And over its lifetime, it's morphed as time's gone on. In the first 10 years of the Waitangi Tribunal, we had no lever to look back to 1840. It took to 1985 to win that right. And then from then on, well, we've had the period of treaty settlements, so it's always continually evolving, and it might be time for it to evolve again. We're at a point in time where our young people actually know more than the older people about the Treaty of Waitangi, about the history of this country. And so there needs to be a point of reckoning where Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Waitangi Tribunal, becomes a binding, a judiciary that produces binding findings for the Crown. And my personal members' bill is targeted at ensuring that the Waitangi Tribunal has the power to give binding rulings to the Crown and becomes a true intermediary between tangata whenua and the Crown going forward.
Councillor, can I pick up on that point? A true intermediary between tangata whenua and the Crown. You can hear the intent of that statement, right? Isn't that right? Shouldn't that be the role of the tribunal?
Well, the Waitangi Tribunal has played a really important role, and I do want to make sure that I make that point. In New Zealand's history, it's about putting right the wrongs of the past. And we've always stood by treaty settlements because we do believe that wrongs of the past should be put right. But the Waitangi Tribunal should not be politicised to the point where they're binding obligations to the Crown, because actually that's what elections are for. That's what we're put there for. That's what a democracy is about. People put their hand up to be a representative within government and within Parliament, and Te Pāti Māori are there because they were elected into government. Willie Jackson's there because he was elected into government, and he has a right to stand in Parliament and fight for what he thinks is right. That's democracy, and the Waitangi Tribunal should not be able to override that democracy.
But given the storied history of the tribunal and why it was set up, why then is there a position by which you will not appear in front of that tribunal? Because they are simply undertaking their role, as set out by legislation, aligned with Te Tiriti o Waitangi.
Look, there was a lot of talk about how we wouldn't show up, we wouldn't produce things. We produced over 2,000 pages worth of documents for the Waitangi Tribunal with evidence of what had been put forward. They were actually reviewing something that hadn't actually been put in place yet. How can you actually review a policy or a law that hasn't actually come into Parliament yet? They were provided with absolutely everything that they asked for. They were provided with officials that showed up and that spent hours talking about the coalition agreement and what was being put on the table. There was nothing more that I could have added. As a minister, quite frankly, I think my time is better spent out on the ground, meeting people in the communities and talking to them about those concerns. Hapu and iwi have approached me, and I have gone to every single one that has approached me and asked me for a meeting, face to face, to discuss their concerns with this issue.
Dana Kirkpatrick, do you have a view that the Waitangi Tribunal should be able to make and have the power to make binding resolutions upon the Crown for government policy, that it should be empowered to do so, given the storied history of that tribunal?
Look, like, as I said, I think that the Waitangi Tribunal has played a very important part, but I'm not sure that we are in a space where binding decisions on the Crown and on the government and on legislation, that is Parliament's job, that is the job of the government, and I think that the government is elected to play that part, and they need to listen to iwi. They have those conversations, they have great representation, and that's what we should do. There's
a couple of things that have come up. I want to carry on with this. We do have to go to break. We will come back. We are going to also talk a bit more after the break on the hui with our MPs from our 5 political parties. Stay with us. We have more after this. Kia ora mai anō, nau mai. E harai te mea me whakahohoro, but let's talk fast-track legislation on our MPs debate on the hui. Karen Chua, over 20,000 people marched in Auckland over the weekend in opposition to the proposed fast-track legislation. Has the coalition government got this wrong, given the depth of feeling expressed in that march?
Look, when there's change, there's always people that would like to express their thoughts and feelings around what that change is and how they think it's going to affect them. This is a government that has come together, a coalition of government, with the agreement that we're actually going to focus on making it easier to build, easier to consent that building process, so we can make sure that we've got that vital infrastructure available to be able to build and grow our economy. Because right now we have known that it costs around $1.3 billion every year to actually go through the consenting process. Consenting processes have doubled, so we need to find a way to make it easier to build. It shouldn't take longer to consent than actually to build.
OK, if a lot of submissions come back and say get rid of the power of veto by 3 ministers to be able to fast-track projects, if that's what the majority of submissions say, would you support that?
Look, I'm not on that select committee, and I can't speak.
No, but just out of
I can't speak to that.
Just out of
but what I can speak to is that just saying ministers have a veto, there is a process that actually I don't think has been spoken about enough. This is not about riding roughshod over the environment. There will be an expert advisory board that once these ministers or the government decides these projects may be ready for fast track, there will be an expert advisory board that will take that into consideration and will be able to attach
the problem is they all
environmental
think that these ministers are
issues.
They think there's a corruption element with 3 ministers making the decision, and the communities and our people are not getting the opportunity. That's the problem with this process.
OK, no, I'll come to Tākuta first, because I want to ask, because given what you've heard, given the process that's just been spelt out, Tākuta, people are going to have their say, projects will go to an expert panel, then there's a decision that's going to be made.
Well, we all know that the minister's going to get to make the end decision. That's it. Now, for Te Iwi Māori, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, my parents have fought generation after generation after generation to care for and look after te taiao so that it's there for our mokopuna. And even in our own lifetimes, we've seen the degradation of all of our local coastal places, and that has a severe impact on local tangata whenua. If you come to my marae, we are world-renowned for producing hakari from the coast. And if things like the Rena disaster, if they become common practice and things end up just destroying our coastlines, that part of our culture will be lost. So we cannot, absolutely cannot, agree to the proposal here. And 27,000 submitters, the vast majority, the 99.99% of the ones who submitted can't be wrong.
Timothy Paul, the other thing to remember here is that, yes, there are a bulk of 3 ministers that will be making decisions, but Tama Pōtaka, as the Minister of Conservation, will also be brought in some of the proposals too. Surely that will assuage some people's concerns, won't it?
It definitely will not. No one is buying this whole idea that you got the 3 stooges that are going to, approve all of these oil and mining. One of these ministers brags about native species going extinct. Brags openly about that. I really just want to reinforce the point that my generation, we will not stand by and let them destroy our environment, destroy our chances at living on this planet, destroy our species that we will never see again. This is about... There are things that are more important than money, and I think that is where this whole fast-track bill and this government completely misses the boat. And again, goes back to that word of greed.
Do you agree, though, there needs to be an increase in development to be able to allow a developing economy, a thriving economy, a growing economy?
We were just talking about democracy. We had our government MPs right here saying democracy is important. People need to have a say. Exactly. And that is why there is a process that allows for development to happen and also allows for iwi and hapu to have their settlements acknowledged and respected. It also allows for local communities to have their say, for us to take into account the irreversible environmental impacts of these projects.
Willie Jackson, there are extensive provisions written into the bill to require consultation with iwi and mana whenua as a part of any project that will potentially be fast-tracked. Yes. So again, there's security in that,
there's no security.
Why not?
Because the reality is 3 ministers have the final say. That was not the case when we were in government. This is our people right across the street. You can laugh all you like, but people are saying, and we have thousands and thousands of them over the weekend. This is corruption. This is corruption because iwi are not getting. They're getting a bit of a kōrero, but then you've already heard Shane. Shane just rolls over and says, no, waste of time, mau taima, we're going to go ahead of it. I've never seen anything like it. And you're taking away the opportunity in terms of an independent committee making the final decisions, which is what we did. Here's the problem, Julian. All the way along, this government is cutting back on kaupapa Māori initiatives all the way. Whether it's the Treaty Principles Bill, they're rejecting what the courts have been saying for years and years and years. Whether it's the treaty and legislation, it is a total attack on Māori rights. And these 2 over here should hang their heads in shame.
That's good, Patrick. Apparently you have to hang your head in shame.
Well, I don't think I'll be doing that. Thank you very much for your advice, Willie. But look, let's get back to some facts here, shall we? The legislation was written by the Ministry for the Environment. There are more iwi, hapu, post-settlement government entities on the list of people who were interested in projects than anything else.
But you can ignore them.
They were more interested in this because they know they have projects, they want to get things moving, they've got things they want to do because they want to put money into their social investment arms, they want to deliver for their people, they want jobs, they want apprenticeships, and they know that the fast-track legislation will get things moving.
We came out in opposition against this. Ngāi tahu Waikato Tainui, Ngāti Toa even held a march in front of Parliament.
And yet they still have projects they want fast-tracked.
But what you
so the other thing is, if the bulk of the submissions say we will veto ministerial powers on this, will you support it?
Sorry, say that again?
So getting rid of the ministerial veto, if that's what the submissions say, will you support it?
Look, I think there's a whole process before that gives the ministers the good advice and what they need to make the decision.
Do we trust Chris Bishop?
We have to leave it there because we have to wrap the TV part of the show, but we are going to continue the kōrero after this online. So join us online for more from our participants and our representatives. Our thanks to our representatives from all the parties here tonight. Really appreciate it. Stay with us. You can watch it on Facebook Live or on the Hui on YouTube channel as well for our online kōrero after this. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa, and again to our MPs who are here with us tonight. Kia mau ki te tūranga o Taputapu Ātea, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Kia ora mai anō. We are back online just like that, lickety split. We have still with us in the studio now from the National Party, Dana Kirkpatrick. We also have from Te Pāti Māori, Tāku Te Whereas, and from the Green Party of Aotearoa, Timothy Paul, and from the Labour Party, Willie Jackson. Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for staying with us. Unfortunately, Karen had to catch a flight, so we've let Karen go, but we've still got 4 of the parties here with us. Dan, I want to start with you, and I want to talk about the depth of feeling that has been expressed recently. We've seen people take to the streets. We've seen hikoi, we've seen kākoi, we've seen another hikoi in downtown Wellington, as mentioned earlier, in Auckland, 20,000 people on fast-track legislation. Can you understand the depth of feeling that has motivated people to activate and hit the streets over the last couple of weeks?
Look, people are well within their right to demonstrate their feelings via protest. If I could just say one thing, I think it's kind of baffling to have a protest about the budget prior to knowing what's in the budget, because there was a whole lot of work that they could have worked on.
They weren't far off, though, were they, Dana?
Oh, I think they were a long way off. There is a lot in there that delivers for every New Zealander, which is what our government is aiming at and targeting our spend to. I think that we take on board their comments and their feeling, but at the end of the day, the government is elected by the majority in New Zealand, and it has a job to do, which is to get this economy turned around and to get the cost of living under control and get people in jobs, better healthcare, better justice and better education.
Is there a concern, though, and given some recent polls that have come out, even on the Ipsos poll that was released over the last couple of days, which talked about, again, less than 50% of New Zealanders are currently approve of the job that the government is doing. So when you see people take to the streets, does it concern you that you might be pushing against the tide a bit here?
No, it doesn't. I have full confidence in this coalition government and in what we're aiming to do. You cannot turn a frigate around on a 5-cent piece. It takes time to get this country back from the last 6 years of mismanagement, of overspending, overtaxing, all of those things that we have now working really hard with the coalition partners to deliver for all of New Zealanders, Māori and non-Māori, across the board. We are committed to a better New Zealand.
Tāku Te Whereas, why was that activation undertaken on budget day when the details of that budget weren't actually known?
Well, I think the attitude of the government has been clearly laid bare for te iwi Māori to see. And we know and understand what our history of fighting to get every little incremental gain has been for the last 70 years. And to have a government come out in 2024 and do the things that it's done to te iwi Māori is unconscionable. So there was no guessing about how the budget would look. It would look like $300 million worth of Māori for Māori, to Māori, by Māori, pulled out, chucked out the back, and, mega prisons built, no money for kāinga ora, this type of thing. So let me be absolutely clear. Te iwi Māori understand what the government's attitude is, and when they showed up and stood up in every community around this country, it is a clear indication that they are not happy. They're not a happy tiriti partner. The government's not a good tiriti partner, and we need stronger accountability for governments going forward, any government in this country.
So is the outcome of the activation to set up a separate Māori parliament? Is that the answer?
A Māori parliament's not a new idea, Jules. And for all of our people watching, it's not a new idea. Māori have always stood in our rangatiratanga, and we've chosen to exercise it how we've deemed fit in the particular time. And when you get to 2024 and you see treaty protections being ripped out, treaty rights that have been hard fought, hard won over 50 years being nullified at the slice of a pen, then it's time for us to move. And our young people will not stand for it. The country is going to depend on our young people going forward. We're the biggest segment of the future workforce of this country. And if governments won't commit to supporting them as they develop, well, it's time for us to do it ourselves.
The biggest challenge against that, though, is everyone had an opportunity to vote last year. This government won. It was forced to go into a coalition with other coalition partners, and all those parties were pretty clear about what they were going to do. So this looks like, for some people, a tossing of toys. And because we can't win, because we didn't win the election, and therefore policy has trumped what is happening at the moment, and the budget is the way that it is, then this is just looks like tossing of toys, and we're going to set up our own parliament as a result.
Well, look, what the government and successive governments have always chosen to ignore is that the constitutional bedrock of the country is te tiriti o Waitangi. It's the thing that provides any government its constitutional right to operate. And Māori are continually ignored, the treaty is continually ignored, and we will no longer allow it going forward.
Willie Jackson, do you support this, the idea of a separate Māori parliament? I mean, you're a parliamentarian. You were voted into parliament.
As Doc was saying, you know, the idea of a separate Māori parliament, I think, came in about 1898. It was about 18. I thought it was brilliant at the time because
well, you're here in 1890.
They used to bring the Māori MPs in, and iwi and hapu used to make them accountable. And so I think it worked in 1890 when you had 4 Māori MPs.
But you don't think it'll work now?
I don't think it'll work. I understand the frustration. I don't think it'll work now. Problem is we've got 33 Māori MPs now. We've got 7 electorate MPs, and we've got 26 who are not accountable, directly accountable to their people. I think so. I don't think it works now. I think a Congress works now, and I know Mason Jury put up their whakaro. He's got a whole paper out on a Māori Congress, and I think a Congress, a strong Congress that brings iwi and urban authorities, NGOs together, I think that's a better idea than a Māori Parliament, because I think that confuses things. And I think, but I understand the frustration, but I also believe that we have kaupapa in front of us that we have to advance: education, health, all these areas, our reo, and we have to get necessary funding. We've got a fight in front of us. Housing, Māori housing, all of this has been cut back by up to $300 million. I think a Māori Parliament is a distraction at the moment, but I understand the frustration.
The reason I ask is you have to tread a tricky path here, because you're an opposition that wants to be a government in 2 years' time, right? And yet when you hear people talking about it, and it's vociferous and it's loud. People want a separate system. No. Because the rights enshrined, committed to in Te Tiriti o Waitangi, according to them, are not being met by the current government. You need to cut a different path.
Absolutely.
Well,
this is
and if you don't tread carefully, people will vote against you as a result of that.
I think this kaupapa of a Māori Parliament is a good kaupapa for us to talk about. This is where our people are frustrated. I don't support it, but I support talking about it, I support debating it, and maybe from that we get a Congress. See, Mason Jury's put a paper up that we should be discussing, and I think that's more relevant. I think a Māori Parliament's too much of a distraction. Māori King said that at the hui the other day. Doesn't mean to say it's not an important kaupapa to talk about. That's what you do. That's what parties do. And we might have subtle differences and things, but the reality is, as Takuto was saying, we are a people under attack. I said at the start of this term, our people will respond on the Treaty Principles Bill. I said there'll be just about a civil war. That's what I said. We haven't even got to the Treaty Principles Bill yet, and look at the marches that are happening.
Tamitha Paul, there was the comment made by a former Green Party leader, actually, at the march in Auckland, in downtown Auckland, the other day, which was, this is just the beginning, i.e. we're going to see more activations, we're going to see more hikoi. Is that going to get to a point at which we get better outcomes, not just for Māori, but for New Zealanders, which this government talks about a lot? Is that going to actually accrue outcomes for our communities?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard because we've got a government that does not care at all about the level of disdain and the level of unhappiness, the struggle that people are going through at the moment.
That's not what Dana just said, though.
That's onto the streets. That is a symptom of living in a country where you don't feel like your government is listening to you. That is why you turn out on the streets. That is why you block developments from happening. I would like to see these oil and mining companies come in here and do some drilling. The level of resistance that they will experience is going to be next level. Like Willie said, when the Treaty Principles Bill comes out, we will have hikois from hell. Like, it will be next level, because that's how people are feeling. They're feeling like they want to engage. They are so upset. And before you said, well, they should have voted. Tell me how people are supposed to vote on the incomes and wages that they are currently on. You know, it is very hard to engage in the system when you are working every hour that you have to put kai on the table, to try and provide for your whānau, to try and provide for your kids. It is very hard to engage and to find the time to vote. But I think people are so upset and so frustrated with the disregard that this government has for our taiao and for our people.
Look, can I just add to this, because Te Pāti Māori...
Well, I do want to get it.
Te Pāti Māori organised the protest, and well done to them. what happens when all of Māoridom are activated. That's the thing. Look at how much success they had. This is just the beginning.
And I'm going to get down to the another
Sorry.
day, but I just want to say to Timothy that the other thing that comes to mind, though, is that, I mean, you've been on council. You're now in Parliament, right? Do you support the idea of the separate Parliament approach, of a Māori Parliament approach? Because the answer to that could be, well, actually, we still need to hold this government to account. You can't do that in a separate system.
Who says?
Well, that's the point, though, isn't it?
I actually think that, you know, this system that we have in place is not set up to actually bring everybody together to work on the issues that actually threaten our existence. Talking about climate change, talking about the decline of our natural environment, talking about the levels of poverty that we're experiencing. These should be non-political.
You're talking about a Westminster parliamentary system.
Talking about a Westminster system here. It is not equipped to deal with the long-term challenges and the cross-party commitment that we need. So, yeah, I think it is time to chuck out that model, 100%, and we should look at something that actually serves our people, serves the taiao, and allows us to work together rather than constantly working in this hostile environment where we make decades of progress and then this government comes in and overrules it overnight. I mean, there's no sustainability in that, so we have to look at something different.
Can I get you to respond? I'll come back to you, Tucker, but I just want to, there's been some, you know, some pretty direct comments that have been made here, Dana. How do you respond to some of those, you know, the accusations about the fact that people can't participate in the system, that people don't have,
so
you know, the idea of direct democracy in this system?
Look, I think we do have a democratic system. I find it interesting that the Green Party member doesn't want to have the system, but and yet was elected into it on a list, you know, a ticket. That's how we operate.
I wasn't on a list.
I think, though, that the bigger question, perhaps, is how do we engage more Māori? How do we get more Māori to stand up and put their hand up to be elected? How do we get more Māori to vote and to have their voice? I don't agree at all with a separate Māori parliament, and in the conversations I've had over the last few weekends, I don't think that all Māori do agree with that either. I think there's a good base, and we need to keep building our iwi conversations and our approach to how we encourage iwi and Māori and tamariki and rangatahi. And Takuta is right, you know, it's a very young Māori population in New Zealand, and we have an opportunity, I think, to work alongside them.
Can I ask about the treaty principles? Do you support it?
National will support the treaty principles. Me? No, we will. I'm firmly in that camp.
Guys, no!
We will support it unto the first reading and to select committee.
Can I ask why you don't support it?
Oh, look, no, sorry, I meant what we would support it to the first reading. We don't support it beyond that. And we certainly don't believe in a referendum.
Why do you feel that way, though? Do you mind me asking?
Because I think it's worth having the conversation. I think it's worth hearing from people in a select committee process about how they feel about that, what that looks like. And I think for me, I would like us to be clearer for all of New Zealand about what those treaty principles mean and how we can enact them and how we can educate people and understand them.
Doug, sorry, I'll cut you off.
Just quickly on the Māori Parliament idea, Jules. The phrase a Māori Parliament, that's the phrase we used, okay? That gets it into everyone's consciousness. But what we're talking about is he whare no te rangatiratanga o te iwi Māori.
This is the tricameral approach that Moana Jackson mentioned.
So not necessarily a parliament.
So it will take time. It will take time. This government, you know, governments in New Zealand have had 160 years to refine what they've done, and they've done a great job at marginalising us. Now, just on the treaty principles bill, it'll go down in history as one of the most divisive things this country has ever seen. And it's up to Christopher Luxon to rein in his coalition partners, not to give a crowd who got 8% of a vote from a particular demographic of this country, to throw something out there in the public that is creating distress and could very well create some civil disorder as it goes forward. It's incumbent on them to do the right thing for the future. And with regard to Te Tiriti o Waitangi, Te Tiriti o Waitangi is not a mechanism of democracy. It's not a piece of the democracy. It is the thing that underpins and enables the democracy. So when those ideas are conflated and mixed up, this stuff gets all gets very messy. But let's be clear e te iwi, te tiriti o Waitangi is beyond democracy and it is not to be confused with it.
Can I throw something out there? There are 33 Māori MPs. There are many Māori who are ministers in this current coalition government.
Oh, kia ora.
The accusation could be made that this is actually the Te Tiriti Manifest. Now, I know politically that raises some issues because you have political views and perspectives that are different. But there are many Māori MPs who are pushing this agenda as a part of this coalition government.
Well, the Māori MPs who are in those positions are held to account to the leadership of their parties, who are all not Māori. Okay, they are Pākehā ideologies. They come from long-standing, well-entrenched Pākehā views. And let's not beat around the bush. You know, in the 1800s, the governments of this country were extremely racist. They were overtly racist. They weren't worried about hiding it. And as we come into the more modern times, while things have become a bit more sophisticated, it's harder to identify racism. It's called systemic and other types now, but it's still there. So long as all of the control rests in those pockets of power and those pockets of people, we will struggle.
You've got to remember some of those leaders are Māori. They just have whakaro.
David Seymour, Winston Peters.
So kei te he tēnā.
Yeah.
You know, but they got whakaro Pākehā. There's no kaupapa-driven strategy from some of those leaders. You know, You're hearing them. They just want to chuck us all in one pot, and there's no recognition that by Māori, for Māori solutions are an answer. They have to accommodate a universal strategy.
Before I move on to employment, I just want to give Tim the time to respond, because there was a comment made about not agreeing with the system that you are now a part of. You know what I mean? How do you respond to that? Because that's what people will say.
Well, look, I make no apologies for being a 27-year-old Māori woman that is in Parliament. I'm representing a city that, looks like me, and that and striving to do that. So that is important. But I think there's another important piece to say. I will use the tools available to me to support my communities, but at the same time, I need to be very honest with people in the limitations of that system, and that it's very much bound by, the government of the day. And again, I think there's some of those issues that we have to work together to solve. Yeah,
OK. And the other thing I get from this discussion is that I think there is some willingness to want to work together, actually. Now that I hear about it, I know there are some different policy aspirations, but even when you talk about things like the Treaty Principles Bill, it sounds very much to me like you don't agree with the whole thing, even though you've committed to first reading. But anyway, but, there is some scope to move. So one of the things that I want to talk about now is employment, because we have, supposedly, a very limited economy. We need to create greater opportunities to increase employment and long-term sustainable jobs, not just for our people, but when we are in a Māori context, on a Māori program, so therefore for our people. How do we do that, Dana? How do we do that?
Look, we have to get this economy back up and running. We have got to find ways to attract investment into our country, to build infrastructure, to build jobs, to build opportunities for iwi and for businesses in New Zealand to be successful and to provide better opportunities all around. Look, if we can do that, we help with the cost of living, we increase incomes for people, we increase opportunities for jobs. We have a great social development and social investment strategy that looks around how we support communities and people within those communities to have the skills they need to get jobs, to be apprentices and to do this work.
So there'll be people watching this, hearing you say that and going, and you're cutting all these thousands of jobs in the public service.
Look, we can't continue to spend the money in the public service that we have been. We have increased, I think, the public service by something like 14,000 jobs for no better outcome. And what I mean by that is there was nothing better delivered on the ground for 80% more spending. Every metric that we looked at went backwards.
So that public service job cuts is your fault, Willie Jackson, because you were the ones that increased the amount of people who were employed in the public sector, not for better outcomes.
What Dana said in the first part of her kōrero, spot on. Absolutely, everything she said, I think we'd all agree with it. But then you can't, as you said, you can't say that type of kōrero and then cut all the areas in terms of targeted funding. What we knew was mana and mahi was working. We knew he Pautama Rangatahi was working. We know Māori trade training is working. You have to invest in the people. You have to invest in young people. We know apprenticeships are working, and these guys are cutting.
It's at the front line.
In one sense, they say the right things, and in the other sense is they cut all the community funding, they cut all the targeted funding, and that's where Dana has to. She's got to go back to her people and say on the coast.
But not from the front line. They're saying not frontline services. That's what they're saying.
They're getting cut from the front line also. We're seeing that in education. You know, you see the cuts in education. They're cutting out assistance. It's all on the kaiako and all that, this type of thing. And that's the problem of what they say. They're saying one thing, but they're cutting services. They're cutting targeted funding right across the spectrum, and they're providing tax cuts continually for their landlords at the expense of the people.
For the people of New Zealand.
Timothy and Taukutu, you both had employment policies in your election campaign. Can those policies stand the test of time now, given the economy, shrinking economy, limited economy that we have, and it isn't a growth economy? Can we still, actualise those policies that were put before the people in the previous election campaign?
Well, from the perspective of somebody representing Wellington, thousands of people have lost their jobs, and it's dark. You know, you talk to someone who drives taxis, they're sitting there for 5 hours a day waiting for somebody to jump in their cab. You talk to people who've started up a little cafe or a restaurant, they've got no customers coming in, people aren't spending any money. It's not good for local economies to cut thousands of jobs. And then you also look, there was $70 million cut from programs that help to get people into employment, programs that are set up to get people into good mahi, and then you look at benefits which have not been adjusted to match the real life fluctuations of the economy. So actually everybody's worse off under this. You know, we have the rhetoric around we want people in the economy working. In reality, we're cutting everybody's jobs that have jobs, and we're making it harder for people to get a job in the first place by cutting that 73 mil. So, you know, you look at the rhetoric and then you look at the actions, you look at the budget, they do not mix. They are not the same thing. So, you know, we're going to have more people going overseas. A lot of my friends who are young people, all of the people who have just studied, got their degrees, are ready to helpfully serve our country, are going overseas. Because why would you stay here, get paid so poorly, you can't afford to buy a house, you do not have the means to start a family, you're going to go to Australia.
So what do we do now then? Given that we are where we are, given that we have the economy that we have, what do we do now?
Well, I think we need to be really clear that this is not making a difference, cutting these thousands of jobs, because that work still has to be done, and guess who's going to do it? Consultants. All of the money that is going to get paid to the big consulting firms, that money is still going to get spent, except for all of our best and brightest people in this country are going to go and head overseas where they actually stand a chance. So you've got the big fat cats in the 4 consultancy firms who are going to be raking it up, and all of us with our degraded public services will be, massive roll sizes in schools, massive long waits in our hospitals, our infrastructure will degrade, and that's all thanks to a government that likes to act like they know how to manage the economy.
6 years of nothing.
Target fair, same question again.
Well, I think back to a quote from Whatarangi Winiata, and he said that Māori have always been the shock absorber of the New Zealand economy. Last into a job, first out. Last hired, first fired. And when the economy is going good, that still leaves us trapped in poverty. And when it's going bad, well, that leaves us right at the bottom of the heap in homelessness. And that's the state that our children have to look forward to. So we really can't address the value of New Zealand's economy overnight. But what we can do is address the distribution of wealth in this country. You know, if we went out and applied taxes to the rich, and there are a whole raft of them that we could do, that see the redistribution of the intense pockets of wealth in this country, that would bring immediate relief to all parts of the community, especially Māori. And as the government has taken out supports, and there are hundreds of millions of dollars of supports being taken out in this budget, it leaves our people exposed to all of the worst effects of a low wage income, of a declining economy, and those things aren't going to be turned around quick, Jules. So more decisive action and redistribution of wealth is a quicker solution.
And I guess, Dana, that's the point, right? Is that things aren't going to turn around quickly. I mean, you mentioned the same thing. Previously. So we're still going to be cutting jobs in public sector and public service cuts, despite the fact that things aren't going to move quickly, which has a negative on flow to wider communities, the likes of which Timothy talked about before. So how do you respond and rebut that point when people are doing it really tough at the moment and they're losing jobs at the same time?
Look, the concept of taxing your way out of a recession is, I think, as one very renowned politician once said, is like standing in a bucket and trying to lift it up. You cannot do it. It is simply not going to work. What we need to do is support people, support businesses, support young people. I feel for the people in Wellington who are losing their jobs. I do. I know some of those people myself. But the reset in the public service needs to happen. We cannot continue to live beyond our means in that space.
But austerity doesn't work either, though, does it? I mean, the UK experience would show that.
Well, you know, we are investing billions of dollars in health, education, law and order, justice, and significant programs across all of those and many other areas going forward that will deliver. That will deliver for Māori, for iwi, for New Zealanders, for all of New Zealand. That is our focus.
I want to thank you all very much for being a part of our panel. Thank you for staying with us online, and also thank the audience who stayed with us as well after watching our on-TV show, on-platform show. What's the right wording? I've forgotten. Anyway, the TV show and then the online show. Thank you for staying with us. Our thanks also to Willie Jackson, Timothy Paul, Daniku Patrick and Taku Te Ferris. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ea kura matira kia kaha.
Kia ora.
I roto i au koutou mai. And thank you again to the audience as well. That is us for this week. Join us for more next week on The Hui. Kia mau ki te tūranga o taputapu a te haumi e. Hui e. Tai ki e. Nā te puna whakatongarewa, te hui, i tautoko.